Good morning, everyone. How are you? Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation, with a little holiday theme that looks like a cup of coffee here. I hope you're doing well. Trying things a little different today, doing a little pre-recorded action for my Facebook Live video today, simply because I am still away on vacation. But you, the fans, I want to keep you educated and up to date. And I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about the theme that we're continuing for this month, which is racing and the habits, the intersection of racing and race excellence and habits, and how you manipulate those two settings. I'm in full race mode, or I'm in just winging it, or I've got my full habit mode on. How to be optimized though for success. And really, in many ways, the inspiration for this conversation has come from watching the Olympics. You've been watching these amazing men and women be out there competing. You can see the different phases of their preparation, particularly those athletes who have repeat events. So I'd like you to focus when you think about this as you're applying it to the Olympic viewing experience, that you think of it as athletes who are doing the same thing again and again. So perhaps a track field athlete who's doing the prelims and then the semis and then the finals. She is always running the 200 meters. She is always running the 110-meter hurdles. For example, someone else who's doing like perhaps a different swim event, right? Doing the 100 IM or whatever it may be. So it's a repeat of that same process, which is what your race effectively will be. More dynamic situations, games that involve like a ball, like baseball, basketball, football, soccer, water polo. Those are much more dynamic, team-oriented sports and bring a little different mindset. So really focus on those individual athletes, and then watch as you're just checking them out on the screen, seeing the coverage go through, whether it's athletes, globally that you're watching, or even in your own country, getting a sense for how they're going through the mindset. And you can see the focus, the repetition, the warm-ups that they do, the things that they do to get ready to race, the things that they're doing in the race that set them apart from the competition, and then the post-race, sort of debrief process and how that works. I think it's really important to kind of understand that mindset. And as a visual person, it's great for me to be able to see that put into practice. And the Olympics there's no better crucible for seeing what things work inside the Olympics. So that brings me to today's topic here in the live version of our weekly support athlete area, which is race habits that help. So I don't want to think specifically about speed. I do have a webinar going on Wednesday night, August 4th, about my monthly coach lesson, which is open to everyone, around finding race day speed. But this is more about race habits that help. And I put it that generically simply because I wanted you to find an area where you believe that you could do better, and then identify means through habits where we can improve that situation for yourself. I think it's really easy for people to become discouraged on race day by looking at the clock, by measuring themselves against either prior performances or the competition. And at the end of the day, success on race day is about optimization. It's about finding something that works and then repeating that process over and over again. So, short story, one of the places where I'm constantly trying to optimize my performance is food shopping. I do not like to go to new food supermarkets simply because all of a sudden I don't know the path I need to walk. I don't know where the food is stored. One of the worst things that could ever happen to me is when they restock the shelves at my supermarket and move things around. That really messes me up because I have a system in place. I like to optimize it. And my personal goal is to get in and out of the supermarket with complete and utter speed. I do not want to spend extra time there. I want to feel successful about what I've done. I want to come home with things that I can turn into food for the family and make meals out of and have snacks and be healthy. And I don't want to have to waste any time doing it. So you can optimize almost anything. And we think about a race performance, the optimization through habits is really important simply because we've done this huge amount of work. If you think about what an iceberg is, underneath the surface, this race performance that we can see above the surface, we have this massive block of work that you've been doing for months or years upon years that have led to this moment. And habits are your code, your source code for making that race your own, for taking control of it, for staying in control as long as possible, and being as smooth and as consistent as possible across the entire experience. That is what's going to yield success through habits on race day as an endurance athlete. So I've got a list here, and I've divided it into two specific areas. The first area, we're going to talk a little bit about pre-race habits that are helpful. And the second area, we'll talk a little bit more about within the race scenario. I'm not thinking about any specific sports in general, by the way, but, of course, my bias is towards triathlon, but we work with ultra runners and cyclists and off-road cyclists and people who do other sports as well, long distance competitive swimming. So the mindset piece can really help at almost any discipline. So if you're not finding anything specific to you, please ask your question in the comments. I'll be back to answer them. Just tag me with my name, or strike up a conversation with your teammates, strike up your conversation online and find out what are some other areas that you think are helpful or that you still have questions about, and let your teammates contribute. That's what we do here inside Endurance Station. Okay, awesome. I got my handy dandy list over here. I got my handy dandy yummy coffee over here. I'm ready to go. So pre-race habits that help. First and foremost, I think the most important pre-race habit you can have is that smartphone checklist. And I have my smartphone checklist with me. I use my reminders as a tool, and I make my checklist on paper. I brainstorm at first, and then I make that checklist in order of the things that I'm going to do on race morning, pre-race, on my phone. The phone is a really important tool for us because we can take advantage of its multifaceted nature. I can have a flashlight if I'm setting up a transition area in the dark. I can play music, more on that later, if that's really helpful to me to stay focused. I've got my checklist right there on the screen, and I can just check them off as I go. In fact, I typically have the written checklist as a picture, as a backup, and then my actual checklist that I'm checking things off as I go. And that really walks me through the process. So I've thought long and hard about what it is I'm going to do on race morning and what comes first. For example, I'm not tying my shoes before I put my shoes on and make sure my inserts are in there, right? I'm not powering up my Garmin watch before I get out of bed. So I have a process and a list of steps, and that becomes a source of comfort. And again, puts me in a position of control. I've thought many times about what I'm going to do pre-race. And when I've got that lined up, I'm simply just checking boxes as I go. It makes life very easy. For the most part, race morning will be pretty automated for you, but the checklist is something that you can just dive back into if you need to. So I may get up and eat breakfast, and that's pretty straightforward. But when I sit down and I'm thinking about what it's going to mean to leave my hotel and start making my way down to the race site, I don't want to forget anything. I can pull out that checklist and make sure I have all the things and I've done all the things I need to do. Being able to check those boxes, even if it's not quite in order, becomes a really helpful process to keeping you in control and also making sure you've done all the things you need. Don't want to find out when you get to the race site or the race venue that you forgot to do something magical with your socks, or pick up that extra backup set of contacts or whatever it is that you wanted to do. Okay, awesome. The second piece about a pre-race habit that I believe is important is music. Music is a powerful centering tool for you as an endurance athlete. We do our training on a consistent basis, and what you do on race day is very similar to what we will do in training. And we can use music as a tool to prepare you or to align your race day experience with what you've done beforehand. So for me, race morning and my pre-race rituals involve lots of sort of lower tempo, smooth, more Zen-like, I guess, music that keeps me focused and keeps me dialed into what I need to do, internally focused on my body, keeping me calm despite all the mayhem that I see around me, and allows me to stay on point. As I move closer and closer to the race, I'm changing my music, perhaps getting a little more amped up, culminating with like sort of a jam song that I want to have inside my head, either as I'm starting my day or that I'm going to carry with me throughout my race experience. And those are songs or tracks or things that we can use across the course of our training, particularly in the last 12-week build, that will orient you to that scenario. So before a quality workout, you can listen to that jam song. Before a nice, long, easy session, you might listen to your Zen song. Or while you're getting ready for those workouts, at the end of your training block, you can use that Zen song as part of that pre-race ritual. And it really centers you and brings you back to what's important and keeps you internally focused and on track. Another great component of having that smartphone access for you as well. Okay. And the third and final pre-race habit that is helpful for racing is a breakfast. Really understanding what breakfast works for you, and also when you want to eat that breakfast. Depending on the quantity of calories that you need to consume, the distance between feeding time and racing time is important. For a long course triathlete, for example, I take in quite a significant amount of calories before a race. I'm a bigger athlete, 6'2", 180 pounds if I'm lucky on race day. So I have a lot of calories that need to go in. So I need to be done eating 3 hours before I start. So if my race starts at 6:45, I'm done eating at 3:45, so I can get all that food into my system. If I'm doing something much shorter, like a sprint race or a 5K, I can tend to eat a little bit closer. and my fueling habits will change a little bit. So the duration of the race does matter for me, simply because duration dictates volume of calories, and I have to make sure that I've got everything lined in. So wherever you fall on that spectrum, from 5K to Ironman, know how many calories you need to take, and make sure you've got the appropriate gap to your race. Now, the other element of pre-race fueling that I think is important is just understanding what food you can easily make on race morning for breakfast, no matter where you are. I've got a ritual, thanks to our partners at the Core Diet, where I use unsweetened applesauce, a scoop of protein powder, a banana, and some sports drink as my morning meal, of course, with my yummy coffee. And that allows me to eat that anywhere. I can buy the unsweetened applesauce at a supermarket. I can take it with me. It doesn't go bad. I don't need a microwave. I don't need pots and pans. I don't need to make a mess. I'm not trying to cook something and also do something else. I can just put it all together and eat it. And the simplicity of that process is not lost upon me. So when you're thinking about your pre-race breakfast, or what you like to eat, or what you've optimized over time to eat, make sure it's as compact and as simple as possible, so that you know what you need to eat, you know when to eat it, and you easily have access to it, so we don't have to go through any complicated steps or changes or things that may go wrong. Okay, awesome. Okay, so we're about to transition here from our pre-race checklist into the race habits that make a difference. Time for me to power up here with a sip of my coffee. I think I need a live presentation checklist as well. That may help me. Who knows? All right, so if I did, I'd be listening to more of my pumped up music as we're getting through the middle part of the race and then heading towards the end. So race day habits. We've got the pre-race section. Let's talk a little bit about race day habits that help, and what are the sort of macro level things that you can have in place that will keep you on track and keep you happy and moving forward. So number one, and I think this is super helpful, race mantras that you can use by situation. So if we go back to that triathlon example of swim, transition, bike, transition, run, you've got sort of 5 different spaces in the race you may want to do, and having a mantra for each one, something that you zone in on, a phrase that you repeat, or an image that you cultivate inside your head, can be super helpful. So for some people, the swimming is, finding Nemo, like Dory says, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, happy, doing what we need to do, staying on point, bumping around, getting a little lost, kind of disoriented, like, do I know you? And just keep swimming, just keep going, right? That T1 example, you might have a mindset. For me at Arizona in 2019, my mindset was pure speed. My job was to get from point A to point B as fast as I could. Success in my transition was getting out of the swim exit and then running the half mile to the transition area as fast as I could. So I was prepared to do this half mile sprint in a semi-wetsuit state on a very tiny path as fast as I could. That was my mindset. So that was probably more like, I don't know, say like Rage Against the Machine or something, like super fast, high pace stuff, right? So I've got that music in my head, and I've got this set here that I'm like a race car driver. So I'm like, all I'm thinking about in T1 is race car driver. How fast can I be? I've got this, F1 race car track experience where the driver pulls into the pit, the wheels are pulled off, everything's done, and they get out. That's my visual. That's what I've got going through my head. So have these mantras inside your head for each part of the race, whether it's multifaceted like a triathlon, or even if it's just a long duration, if you're doing an ultra run, for example, or you just got a long day on the bike, you're doing Leadville. The race is broken up into different sections. Get yourself a mantra for each of those sections. Have them written down so you know which one you're going to at the next time. Of course, we have numbers to watch for on our watch. We have experiences we want to orient ourselves to from a physiological perspective to the situation on the course. But at the same time, that mantra is kind of that background, like when your mind starts to wander or the other numbers are okay, or maybe they're not okay, that we have this mantra we can go to keep us centered and on track, okay? Similar to that, I think another really helpful race day habit is having default decisions that we follow, or default rules that we follow. For example, maybe you're not a great climber. So when you're running on race day or riding on race day and you get to this critical section of a climb, you're concerned about this climb. So what are the rules that you follow when you hit a climb? Well, if it's a long climb, like, oh, I need to be in my small ring in the front and I need to be in the middle of my cog in the back. My default rule for climbs like this is go here and start here, right? Or my default rule for running at the start of the race is not to go off the road to the sidewalk and try and pass people. As tempting as it is, my default rule is to stay here. And the default rules are important simply because it allows you to make a decision that fits consistently with what your skill set is and what your ability to compete on race day is. So we know, for example, if you're getting to a key descent part and you're not great at the descending area, what are your default rules for descending? Where do your feet go on the bike? Where do you sit? Where do your hands go? How are you positioned? What are you going to sort of dial in that comfortable area for you to be able to be successful on the race itself, but not feel as though you're out of your comfort zone? And those default rules really help. Another area where default rules can help you is decisions, for example, that are more dynamic. So again, we'll go back to sort of that triathlon non-drafting space. If someone cuts in front of you, what are your default rules for handling a situation where someone just, pulls around you, you're supposed to ease off and they cut directly in front of you? What do you do in that scenario? You're going to have to do that several times on race day, and these default rules become really helpful. It's easy when you don't have default rules to treat each situation individually and dynamically. For example, perhaps the person who pulled in front of you and cut over is, I don't know, they're wearing orange and they were kind of mean before, and now you're angry about this person. And so you get into this more interpersonal dialogue inside your head and get taken out of your race space. Don't treat that emotion is not helpful at this point in time in the race. This is a default activity. It doesn't matter who cuts you off. If you were driving to work, you'll get cut off millions of times. Remember when you used to commute? And so don't take it personally. Just deal with it with your default rules so you stay on track. You're going to need that additional energy, whether it's for critical thinking skills or for making decisions that are going to really optimize your ultimate performance on race day. So let's not waste it on these areas that need just default decisions. So taking a look at your course, taking a look at what your goals are, let's find those areas where we can have default rules that are really relevant to you that will help guide you through the course of your race. And again, really help you save some of that critical energy. And then this last one is two are sort of combined. And so I'll talk about them independently, but it's important. So when we start the race, whatever your endurance race may be, it's sort of having that long-term mindset and being able to say, hey, this is going to be a 10-hour day or an 8-hour day or a 6-hour day or whatever your days can be, or multiple days. At the beginning of the race, we really want to have this long-term mindset. And we're making decisions based off of how I need to be acting in 8 hours, 10 hours, 16 hours, 24 hours, whatever it may be. And I'm really trying to keep myself on track. So it may be tempting in the first hour to get all Ricky Racer and pass people or be aggressive or race to a particular area. But if I've got this long race in mind, it's not really helpful to be so aggressive early. So yes, getting out of the mass start into the single track area first may be important. But if it's an 8-loop course that takes place over 20 hours, that's not as important as being successful over the entire race. If it's a 1-loop race and it's only 12 miles and it's going to be over in 42 minutes, then heck yes, I need to get there. So having that long-term perspective is really important, and using that long-term mindset as a decision-making backdrop for everything that you do early on will be important. So I'm not going to do this aggressive start because I have a long day. I don't want to spike my heart rate. I'm going to start off my fueling early and with fluids because it's a long day and it's going to get very hot later. So this early start for me, it's really important that I optimize my fluid nutrition, for example. Or, at this area of the race, this is not my strength to get started with. So I'm going to be really smart and focused on technique, and I'm going to conserve my energy as much as possible for later in the day. So early decisions, if we were to draw a line on your entire race, sort of at the midway point, the midway point back to the start, working in reverse, all of those early decisions are on long-term mindset. We're letting these early decisions set us up for success long-term. And we're kind of using this long-term mindset to get us out of that space of, making short-term decisions or racing someone to the top of a hill or, winging it with our nutrition when it's still way too early to be doing that. We need things to be consistent and we need to remain in control. The last race day habit that's helpful is being able to transition that mindset. When we hit halfway, that mindset needs to switch from sort of long-term decision-making, what's going to set me up for success in the second half of this race, to that short-term mindset and saying, what do I need to do from here until that next milestone, from here until that next marker, here to the next aid station to be successful. Over the course of your endurance race day, because of your energy expenditures, fatigue, nutrition changes, conditions in the day, daylight hours, your training and preparation, and how you've executed, your world is going to shrink down to a very, very small space, and the ability to exert control over conditions will really be reduced. You can think at mile 20 of a marathon about what you're going to do in mile 26 of the marathon, But those of you who've been there at mile 20 and know how tough that is, you know that mile 20 is all about getting to mile 21 and nothing else, or getting over this hill right now. And I'll solve this problem now, and I'll get to you other problems later, but I need to really be focused on this problem right now. And that short-term mindset becomes really critical. If you're still acting with a long-term mindset, what happens is the end of the race is actually somewhere in between where you are now and the end of that long-term mindset. So what people will do is their mind will drift. They'll drift to thinking about other races. They'll be thinking about the dinner reservation they made. They'll be thinking about something they promised someone else, and they're not focused on the moment. And that long-term mindset is not being a helpful contributor to your success. And we need to be able to toggle that slider, move it from that long-term mindset early and follow me, slam it all the way over to that short-term mindset and say, hey, what do I need to do between now and this next area to remain successful? How am I going to get my heart rate down? How am I going to get these calories in? I know what the end of the race is going to be, or how am I going to get over this hill as fast as I can without doing damage to myself? I need to be internal and focused on this monologue. I know this hurts right now, Patrick, but it can't hurt this bad for this long. We're just going to stick it for another 10 seconds and see what happens. Is it really still this bad at that time or not? And then figure it out, right? So that short-term mindset becomes really important as well. All right, folks. So to recap for today's quick Facebook Live coaching session, which I do every week here on our Facebook channel. And you can also find elsewhere on our podcast channel or video channel as a recap. We had our pre-race habits and then our in-race habits that are helpful. Pre-race habits were our smartphone checklist. Music is a tool, both on the front end for being zen and then at the end for getting pumped. And then a simple, repeatable breakfast that we can repeat and execute on any race scenario just when we need to do it. It gets us fueled and eliminates all of our extracurricular challenges. And then we have our race day habits that help. We have our race mantras by situation, whether it's by discipline for, say, triathlon, or just by context within the course of your longer race. We have default rules that we follow based on who I am, who you are as an athlete. What do I do when I encounter this situation? If you put me on a planet with 10x gravity and I've got to do this same activity there, I should have a set of rules that allow me to follow that. What are those rules? Know those rules for your race, have them written down, be able to follow them on the big day. And then finally, that mindset toggle, being able to be long-term mindset early in the race is going to set you up for success later on, and being able to switch that slider over and become more short-term as your world and your perspective begins to narrow, and the concepts or decisions you need to make for success are on a much more incremental scale. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I certainly love giving it out to you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you think it'll be helpful for someone else, please share out the link so other folks can find out about it. If you've got deeper questions, put them in the comments, or as always, find me over at endurancestation.us, where you can join our community and become one of our hundreds of athletes who are training for their endurance athletic event of choice. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you guys online soon. Coach Patrick, signing off.